Alright, let's get a little personal, shall we? So if you've ever been in a relationship before and you're no longer in a relationship with that same person, it's probably because they were a complete psycho and you needed to get out of that situation as fast as possible. Today's story is all about the first girlfriend I ever had, and by God, was she evil. Now, I need to set the scene for you a little bit so that you know what mentality I was in and what stage of my life I was in. I had just gotten out of high school when her and I got into a relationship. We're going to call her Jay, or if you prefer, we can call her Satan. And that may seem harsh, but you'll understand why. So I had just gotten out of high school, and I'd known Jay ever since I was in middle school. Technically. I had an English class with her, and I guess I terrorized her a lot. There were days where I'd pick up her pencil off her desk and just chuck it across the room just to dick with her. And really, that was kind of the extent of the friendship that we had back then. And then she switched schools, so I didn't see her again until high school. We didn't really hang out a lot, just every time we did, we had a good time with each other. And eventually, we got to a point where we called each other best friends. Even though we didn't hang out all the time, we just clicked that well. Now, Jay went off to college when I was in my senior year of high school, so I didn't see her all that year unless she came to visit. Well, it's summer vacation for me, I had just graduated, everything is awesome, and she comes to visit. We're hanging out for a little bit one day, and she stops as we're walking, and she says, hey, I kind of have feelings for you, and I would really like to see what it would be like if we dated each other. Now, this took me back a little bit. See, she was a Mormon, and I was Jehovah's Witness at the time. This kind of added a tropey Romeo and Juliet type situation between us, but I had never actually thought of her in that way before, so that's why it threw me off. I was like, wait a minute, are you sure we're not moving a little fast? I mean, don't get me wrong, we're really good friends, and we've been friends for a little bit, but why don't we hang out over the summer and see if maybe sparks fly, now that I'm thinking about you like that? This is how she replies. She goes, well, okay, we could be friends and probably drift apart, or we could date each other and get closer over the summer. And I was like, oh, awesome, so it sounds like I have a choice here. Now, at this point, I had never dated anybody. I was a good little Jehovah's Witness boy, and when you're a Jehovah's Witness, you don't date until you're ready to marry. And because of this, it was very difficult for me to tell if a girl liked me anyway. There could have been a girl walk up to me at school and said, Barry, I like you, and then walk away, and I'd be like, was she flirting with me? The hell was that? So when Jay offers me this ultimatum, which is obviously a red flag, I had no idea. The concept of red flags didn't exist in my head. I didn't know what in the world that even was. So I'm just sitting there like, yeah, all right, well, that sounds pretty damn logical to me. Let's give it a shot. And from that day, we started dating officially. Now, I say dated officially, but we never went on traditional dates. I would take her to the park, we would walk around, I'd get to know her, and for me, that was perfectly fine. She was secretly annoyed by this. She wanted dinner and a movie. She wanted a drive down to the ridge on this magical moonlight where we end up at Kisser's Creek, and I didn't know that. She never voiced to me that she hated going to these parks. She just expected me to know that, so that's on me, I guess. But communication, come on. One thing I liked about her was that she was so upfront, but it was kind of weird the way she would pick and choose what things she was upfront about. Fast forward a little bit, and I came down with H. pylori, and if you want to know more about that, my last video that I just made is all about H. pylori and what I was going through. The Cliff Notes version is something like this. I started feeling very tired. I started feeling very sick. My appetite was gone and I couldn't eat. I had this terrible chest pain. I would lay down fatigued all day like I'd just run a marathon every single day, which is very weird because I'm generally a very active person. So it was weird that I was going through all this. And I had lost a lot of weight as I was going through this, but as I was going through it, I would still take her out, we'd go on walks, we would go get food, and I would have to take a lot of downtime for myself, and eventually she would get very bothered by this. She would even tell me that I was making up this illness so as not to hang out with her, which is awesome. I mean, obviously, you can't tell that I've lost 20 pounds in 3 weeks. So this one day, I take her out to the park and we're walking around. We're walking down this trail, and as we're walking down it, I notice that the bushes start rustling beneath us, so I look down, and I notice a gardener snake. Now, I love snakes. I love animals in general. If I see any animal walk across our path, that to me is a good omen. But I notice Jay looks down at it, and she sprints towards it to stomp the life out of this snake. This poor creature that's just going about its day, this creature that I was admiring, she runs over to kill it. And so I grab her, and I rip her back from the thing, and as polite as I possibly could, I said, "What the hell are you doing?" She turns and looks at me and she says, "I don't like animals with scales." Now that pissed me off, and I was like, you need to explain better than that. That is not an excuse. This is when this nutbag looks at me and she says, well, Satan in the Bible was a snake. Snakes descend from Satan. Therefore, snakes are evil. And I'm sitting there like, okay. Now, I'd heard from some people at the time that religious people are a little crazy, and I had been a Jehovah's Witness my entire life, and I'd never heard anything like that. And so I snapped back at her, and I was like, okay, Adam and Eve sinned. They went against God. So that means they're evil, and we are descendants of them. So should we just start stomping the life out of each other right now? She didn't respond to that. She just turns back at me and she says, Barry, if I ever see a snake, I'm going to kill it. If I ever see any animal with scales, I am going to kill it. And in the same conversation, she just all of a sudden starts ranting about how babies are ugly and disgusting, and they should die too. Now, again, at this point in my life, I had no concept of red flags. I was just sitting there like, what in the world is this person so crazy for? But, okay, actually, she's a woman, she's blonde, that might be it. Now get this. In this conversation, I thought I'd made some pretty good points, but she scolded me for defending the snake. And then she goes on to say, snakes, babies, and all of your friends. She literally told me that all of my friends could die and she would be happier because my friends take time away from her and I, and that's a problem. Yeah. Again, no concept of red flags. Now, I was pissed, but I just let it all go. A few weeks go by and I start to get really, really sick. I would wake up and I'm not really doing much. I would get out of bed and then I would walk over to the couch and I'd just sit there and lay down all day and just watch TV. And if you know me, that is not something I ever like to do. I want to get up and I want to do things. I'm an energetic guy, but there was something wrong with me. There were days where Jay would text me and she'd ask, hey, what are you up to? Let's hang out today. And I'd be like, look, I'm so sorry, but I can't. I am feeling so much pain. I've just been sitting here all day and I don't know what to do about it. I'm going to go to the doctor tomorrow, see if maybe I can figure out what's going on because I do not like living like this. And she would tell me that she understood. Well, this one day I get a knock on my door, so I get myself up and I go and I open the door and I notice Jay is right there. So I go to give her a hug. She pushes me out of the way, walks into the living room, crosses her arms and waits there for me to go over there. So I'm like, okay, so I shut the door and I walk over there and I see what she has to say. She's just sitting there with crossed arms and she goes, what have you been up to today? And I was like, well, I've just been sitting here watching TV. She cuts me off and she goes, you never hang out with me. You don't like hanging out with me. All you do is sit here all day and do nothing. You're always either in too much pain or you're too busy to see me. I don't even believe that your illness is real. I think you're lying so that you don't have to see me. Now, I'm sitting there thinking, I'm a very straightforward person. If I didn't want to see you, you'd know. I would have told you and you wouldn't see me, right? So this is just kind of crazy, but I was like, okay, how do I diffuse this? So she's sitting there, arms crossed, she's pissed off, and she goes, you're going to take me on a date today, okay? And I'm sitting there like, okay, yeah, all right, well, let's go on a date. Where do you want to go? She goes, you're going to take me to Texas Roadhouse. You are not taking me to the park today. We're going on a real date. All those other dates were garbage. They were not real dates. I was sitting there like, well, that's the first I've heard of that. Jeez, why didn't you tell me that before? Okay, fine, we'll go to Texas Roadhouse. So I get dressed, I grab my keys, we get into my Mazda B2000 pickup truck, and I'm driving her along the way. And the whole time she's complaining. I'm sitting there and I'm driving this truck and it's a stick shift, right? So I would go and put it in second gear, third gear, fourth gear, and she would complain every time I did. She's like, you don't know how to drive stick, obviously. And I'm like, what are you talking about? It's driving. What are you talking about? She's like, yeah, well, my dad, he can drive it to a degree where you don't feel it when he shifts. But yours, you can feel it. It like jolts when you shift. And I'm like, sorry, do you know how to drive stick? And she's like, no. And obviously you don't either. I'm just like, God damn. You are mad. So she gets done complaining about the stick shift thing, and then all of a sudden she just whirlwinds, flips around, and starts freaking out about some other random thing, and I'm just sitting there taking it. Now, you may be wondering, Barry, what a wuss. Why are you just sitting there taking it, you know? What's going on with you? Stick up for yourself, dude. And normally I would have sticking up for myself, but here's the thing that I knew. I was in so much pain and I was so fatigued that I didn't have the energy to actually deal with it. And I knew that if I did confront her and be like, hey, you're being kind of bullshit right now, she would turn it around into this, why are you making me the bad guy? And I just didn't want to deal with it. So I was just like, all right, whatever, you blow up. I'm not mad. I'm fine, you know? You be pissed. So we get to the restaurant and everything is fine. We get out and everything is fine. We go into the restaurant and everything is fine. As soon as my ass hit the cushion, oh man. She starts drilling into me. Why aren't you going to go to college? Why are you not going to do anything with your life? I mean, I've gone to college my senior year because I actually care about my future, but you're going to sit here in this tiny little town and be nothing for the rest of your life? What are you going to do? And I dealt with that the entire date. She sat there the entire time telling me that I was going to be a failure because I was not going to college right away, and I was trying to figure out what it was I wanted to do with my life. And every time I tried to say, look, I just want to see where I end up. I want to see what I'm passionate about. She'd cut me off and be like, well, why aren't you going to go and at least get some credits out of the way? Which, fine, don't get me wrong. That's a smart thing to do. Get some prerequisites out of the way. Totally makes sense. Not with that attitude. I'm not going to be receptive to that shit. So the date ends, I pay, we get back in the truck, and I start taking her back to my place so that she can go get her car. And the entire time, she is still railing me about how I'm a failure, how I'm not going to go to college, how I'm losing my life and wasting it by doing nothing with it, and pretending to have this illness so I can make an excuse for not going out and making something of myself. Eventually, I had enough. I didn't care how sick I was anymore. This was the last straw. So I said, Jay, shut up and listen to me. I'm going to do whatever I'm going to do with my life, and you have no business trying to make me decide what it is I'm going to do. Now, I would have said all that right to her, except for the fact that in the middle of that sentence, she cut me off with the radio. She grabbed the dial and turned it all the way up so that she didn't have to hear me anymore. As soon as she did that, I just looked forward straight ahead the entire rest of the ride home, and I said nothing to her. There actually came a couple points. She turns the radio all the way down, and she's like, Barry, talk to me. Is something wrong? I just sat there, glasses on, looking straight ahead, said nothing for the rest of the trip. I didn't look at her, I didn't talk to her, I said nothing, and we finally get back to my house. As soon as we got back to the house, I open up the truck door, I open up her truck door, walk over and I open up her car door for her. She sits down, she gives me a smile, and she says, "Thank you for the date. That was really nice." That was nice? I looked at her and said, "We're done." I closed her door and I walked inside. Now, admittedly, that wasn't the last time I talked to Jay. A year later, we touched base to see how each other were doing, and she ended up apologizing to me for a lot of the stuff that she had done during our time together. She told me that she legitimately thought that I was faking a disease so as not to hang out with her, and when she found out that it was real and I was like prescribed medicine, it made her feel like crap. When it comes to relationships, my only advice is this. If you're in a relationship and it's bad, if you're in this relationship and it's bad way more often than it is good, get out, because it's not going to get better. There are some crazy people out there, but all you have to do is find one that isn't, and when you do, never let them go, because the alternative is you just wishing you die of H. pylori.